All right, good morning, guys. How are we doing? It is Friday, March 17th. It is St. Patrick's Day. And so, hope you guys are having a good morning. All of the kids are off to school. Amber's off to work. All dressed in green they are. And today we are going to be in Psalm 37, verses 27 through 34. And so, hope you guys are having a good morning, and let's jump in. It says, "Turn from evil and do good. Then you will dwell in the land forever. For the Lord loves the just and will not forsake his faithful ones. Wrongdoers will be completely destroyed. The offspring of the wicked will perish. The righteous will inherit the land and will dwell in it forever. The mouths of the righteous utter wisdom. Their tongue speaks what is just. The law of their God is in their hearts. Their feet do not slip. The wicked lie in wait for the righteous, intent on putting them to death. But the Lord will not leave them in the power of the wicked, or let them be condemned when brought to trial. Hope in the Lord and keep his ways, and he will exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are destroyed, you will see it." And so, David, what really jumped out at me this morning was the first verse from the reading, which says, "Turn from evil and do good. Then you will dwell in the land forever. For the Lord loves the just and will not forsake his faithful ones. That wrongdoers will be completely destroyed. The offspring of the wicked will perish." And I was just thinking about how David calls us to do good. And in the context of the psalm overall, doing good in David's eyes is living justly. That the righteous live in right relationship with God, thus they treat others around them in a just way, in a just manner, where the wicked are unjust to those around them. And in the Hebrew mind, the Hebrew thought overall throughout the scriptures, to live justly means to treat people equally, regardless of their status, regardless of their race, to treat people equally. Now, obviously, they don't always get it right. I mean, there's plenty of examples where they don't get it right. There's plenty of examples where we don't get it right. But overall, God is constantly calling them to treat people equally. And the reason being is simply this: they were slaves in Egypt, and God rescued them out of slavery. And so, when you've been rescued from a place like that, well, then it'd be quite arrogant, wouldn't it, to then treat people like you had been treated before when you were a slave. And so for the Hebrew mind and thought and culture, to treat people equally was to treat people justly. And there were four groups that in particular that they were called to treat justly: the poor, the immigrants or the strangers, the foreigners, the widows, and the orphans. And David says, listen, the way that you live justly, the way that you live in right relationship with God, is it needs to ooze out of you in the way that you treat other people, especially the poor, the immigrant, the widow, and the orphans. And I think the reason why it's so important that we serve the least and the last, the lost, as Jesus perhaps would call it, is because it is to be a reminder of where we were spiritually before we came into the grace of God. That before we were in the grace of God, we were essentially spiritual orphans, spiritual foreigners. We were spiritually poor. And that when we serve those around us who are suffering in those circumstances, it's not simply just to make us feel better, but it's actually to simply extend the grace that was extended to us. That the way that God actually works in the world is through us, through people. And that we are to do good, as David says. Which leads us to St. Patrick's Day. Today is St. Patrick's Day, and it's not just simply a day that you drink green beer and throw a party. But St. Patrick is an interesting story. When he was, I think, 16 years old, he was kidnapped by Irish bandits, marauders, whatever you want to call them, and was sold into slavery in Ireland. And after being a slave for 6 years, he was able to escape, and he believed that the reason he was able to escape was God's divine intervention. And so he went into the to be a priest, studying to be a priest. And as he was studying to be a priest, he kept having this reoccurring dream of the people of Ireland calling him back to come and to share the good news of Jesus. And so St. Patrick actually went back to Ireland, back to the people who enslaved him, and went back and served them, doing good, even though these people had essentially robbed him of his younger years. And so I think, I don't know, that's the challenge, that's the invitation for me, is what does it look like to do good? What does it look like to extend the grace that was extended to me? What does it look like to serve the poor, the immigrant, the slave, the widow, the orphans? What does that look like? Because I think that's what Jesus is calling us to. Jesus says, don't serve people that can pay you back. Don't do things for people that can simply pay you back. Do things for people who can't pay you back. Because that's what grace is about. So, I don't know, hopefully that makes sense to you. I think it's interesting that St. Patrick had the faith to step out and to do what God called him to do. And, I don't know, maybe we should follow that example as well. Today's Friday, and so the hashtag for the day is Step Out in Faith Friday. And so maybe that's what that looks like. What does it look like today? What is the thing God's calling you to do today to step out in faith? And so hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Hopefully you guys have a great weekend. If you go out for a St. Patrick's Day party tonight, be safe, be careful, and be a blessing. So love you guys. We'll see you Monday, and hope you guys have a great weekend. Love you. Bye.